welcome to CCM Discovery. I am your very fortunate host, Roger St. James. And CCM Discovery, we're here to discover new music. We're here to discover the greats from days gone by. We're here to discover what's happening and what's exciting in the contemporary Christian music, entertainment world. And tonight, wow, this is I'm going to have to geek out here for a couple of seconds because tonight we have a very special guest, a man who has been doing it for a very long time and doing it very, very well and been doing it the right way for a very long time. And please, we thank God that we had the opportunity to talk with Scott Wesley Brown.
It's an honor to be here, brother. Excited.
Thank you. Oh, thank you so much, Scott. But before we go, I know it's a couple days late, but I have to wish your granddaughter Olivia a happy birthday.
Thank you.
See,
Yes.
that's the weird thing about the internet. I know about your granddaughter's birthday.
It's amazing. She got almost 500 birthday wishes. I thought, wow, she's already a little celebrity, but she doesn't even know it. She has no concept of what a birthday is. All she knows is that she got a bunch of presents and a donut with pink frosting with sparkles on it. So she's in heaven right now, blessed a whole lot. Yeah,
that's wonderful. I'll give you a couple of seconds here if you want to brag on your family. I'll let you do that because I tend to do that myself.
Well, I've got two daughters, Jessica and Hannah. Jessica lives in Southern California with her husband and two daughters, who are my first two granddaughters. And then my other daughter, Hannah, lives in south of Sydney, Australia, with her husband, Nick. And that's a whole story in and of itself. We're trying to get Nick back here because of some difficulties in his application with the green card. He had to go back to Australia. And so we're working on getting him a green card. And I've actually written to the president. And one of the congressmen here in Alabama is said that they would help and put a stamp of approval on Nick's application. But we're just praying we can get them back here to the States. So at least, if we're separated by a state or two, that's okay. I'd rather be next door, but to be all the way in Australia, that's a long way, 16-hour flight from LA to get to Sydney.
Oh my goodness.
And so I miss my dear little Olivia and our new grandson, Ben, who just turned 3 months old. And
congratulations.
So, thank you. So we're missing all the little special things that these little ones do and that time of their life. And but anyway, we're here in Alabama, Belinda and I, my wife, of 49 years. We moved out here 2 years ago. We were living in Southern California and just said, okay, enough with the traffic, enough with the politics, enough with the money that you have to spend to afford to stay there in Southern California. So we came here to Alabama. We had lived in Tennessee for a number of years. And so we're kind of back in our old neck of the woods, so to speak. But it's really nice just being here in Southern Alabama. We're not too far, maybe 30 minutes down to the beach and a couple miles over to the bay, Mobile Bay. So it's a beautiful area. And just love being down here, love our church. I'm teaching a Sunday school class, and that to me is one of the funnest things I've ever done. I've done some pastoring, and I've done some worship leading in different churches around the country. And but just to have this little group of senior adults, and every Sunday morning we pull together. And right now I'm teaching them. We just finished Ephesians, the book of Ephesians, and now we're going to go through the hymns this whole summer. We've done about 4, and we got about 4 or 5 more to go before we launch into Galatians in the fall. So I'm loving it. Great group of people at our little church here in Daphne, Alabama. So that's kind of in a nutshell where we're at. I don't do too many concerts anymore. I love doing concerts, but it's the travel that gets to you. When you get my age, I've seen my other friends, kind of like, oh man, Wayne Watson, Michael Card, Steve Camp, different guys are just saying, it's just so tough, all this travel. Really wears you out. You always love getting, the opportunity to engage with God's people and to share the gospel with those who don't know Him yet. But I've pulled back quite a bit and maybe just do a few things each year. But working on a lot of new tunes. I opened up a site called Bandcamp. It's a site that a lot of people know about already. You go to it and it's got an artist profile, but you can list as many of your songs as you want, and people can get the new music there and some of the old music. So that's basically what I'm doing.
Oh, that's great. It sounds a lot like Bandcamp is what we're kind of doing here.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Oh, so that's fantastic. Oh, that's great. And I'm glad you look fantastic. You look healthy. You look happy. You've got and I'm going to say that you've got the Scott Wesley Brown smile.
All
That's
right.
something that's always stuck in my head from the first time. And I did meet you a long time ago, and I'll pull that memory out of the bag in a few minutes. But first, to people who don't know, I want to hit the numbers. I mean, you've done 25, 26 albums. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah. I guess if you count a digital album on Bandcamp, I don't know if that counts as an album, but yeah. And then there's a few compilation albums. Sparrow Records for time, they did compilation albums on quite a number of their earlier artists, and so it's somewhere around 25.
Yeah, I miss Sparrow Records, to be honest with you.
I do too.
That because when I first started, I was actually spinning records. So to see that Sparrow logo going around and around, I knew what I was listening to was going to be good.
Yeah.
So, and of course, you've had 9 number 1 songs, and your two, to me, the two that stick out the most were "He Will Carry You" and "Yeshua HaMashiach."
Yeah. There's two. Yeah. He Will Carry is one that I'm always thankful for the Lord, and I really mean this, that I felt like the Lord gave me that song. A lot of songs you labor, you work on, you write. You have to keep going back and dealing with it and messing with it, and you take it to your publisher, and he goes, "Well, maybe change this verse or add this chorus here and all of that." He Will Carry You. I read that poem, "Footprints in the Sand," if you remember that,
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
about how the guy's walking down to on the beach with the Lord, and then all of a sudden, there's one set of footprints, and he says, "Lord, where were you?" And Jesus says to him, "This is when I carried you." And I remember reading that, and went downstairs to my little music room. This is when we lived in Nashville, and sat down and just wrote that song. Boom, and I wish they'd all come like that. And so I always say, well, the Lord really did give me that song, and I'm thankful for it. I pray that it ministers to a lot of people.
Oh, I tell you, every time I still hear it, it's still on my playlist, and it
Mm.
still to this day gives me goosebumps every time I hear it because
And
it's just
an
so
interesting
powerful.
thing a lot of people don't know is singing background on that is Amy Grant and
Oh,
Jamie Owens Collins and Gary Chapman. When they all came in and they did the background vocals for that, so I can hear that. A lot of people wouldn't know it if I didn't tell them that, but I hear it all the time, and I can still remember the three of us, 4 of us, standing around that microphone doing the harmonies there on the choruses.
now I can't, and I'm not going to rush you off the air, but I can't wait to hear that with that new knowledge. Of course, Scott, so much of your stuff was covered by so many people. I won't go through the whole list, but as I was getting ready to talk with you, I found out that actually Placido Domingo covered one of your
Yeah,
songs.
yeah.
What was that? I listened to it, and it was interesting. But what was it like for you?
It was a real, I mean, I don't believe in flukes. I believe in God's providence. And
Mm-hmm.
our record label, Sparrow Records, at the time had just entered into an agreement with Cherry Lane Music, which was owned by John Denver and a few other business partners. And we signed a deal. And normally, when two companies merge, they listen to each other's product. And my album had just come out, and I had a song on it called "My Treasure," which became a wedding song for Sparrow's catalog. And the head guy at Cherry Lane, his name was Milt Oakham, heard that song and he thought, "Wow, that would be a great song for Placido Domingo to record on his album with John Denver." They were trying to bring him into the contemporary world, and they managed John Denver's catalog. So they got the two of them together. They went into the studio, and my song ended up on that album. And I was so surprised, to tell you the truth. I had never heard of him. I don't listen to opera music, but he was there, one of the three tenors, the four tenors, whatever they were called, and phenomenal voice. And so he recorded that song, and it's so interesting. When you write a song and you sing it yourself, or you have a friend sing it, that's one thing. But if you send it out there and you get all these different versions of it, it's amazing the different takes that people have on a song you wrote, and they do it their way and in their style. And so to hear something of mine performed operatically was an interesting and an amazing experience. So that album actually sold like, gosh, I don't know, it went like double or triple platinum.
Oh,
How
wow.
many ever millions of albums that is, and it was a real blessing to have that happen in my career.
Oh, that's and when I found that out and I listened to it, I listened to yours first, and of course it was excellent. Um, and then when I listened to his, it was also excellent, but like you said, in such a different way.
Totally different.
Yeah, but it spoke to me in two different ways, the same words in two different ways, and that's what I just think is so fantastic about well written music.
Have you ever heard of an artist by the name of Dave Boyer?
Nope, but I'm going to write that down
He's
right
he
now.
was a guy that really grew up pretty much in the world of the mafia, and he knew Frank Sinatra, and he knew all the guys that were the big mafia bosses, and he used to sing in Atlantic City and in Vegas and all of these places where a lot of the mafia type people would go. And he became a Christian, and he went to his bosses, pardon me, and he asked him. He said, I really feel God is calling me to go out and to minister to people, and I don't want to do this world anymore. And I will not share any information about anything that I know or people that I know, other than I was just a part of this world. I would like to go into churches and Christian colleges and wherever God would open a door. Will you release me? And they did. They
Oh, wow.
released him. But his music is kind of like a Frank Sinatra style. And I wrote a song called Where There Is Jesus. And it was a real tender song. And it was like, where there is Jesus, his love and peace can be found. Real simple, melodic song. And so he wanted to record that song. And I was expecting him to sing it like that. But when I got the album, I put it on, and it's this big band coming in. He goes, where there is Jesus, hey, his love and peace will be found. It just, it just about fell out of my chair. I thought, that's my song. But bless his heart, he's an incredible guy. He's in his 80s now, probably mid to late 80s, and he is still doing concerts. And what a powerful singer and ministry God has given him.
Oh, see, now this is what excites me about doing this show. CCM Discovery. I just discovered Dave Boyer. And so I'm going to be, after I listen to
Yeah.
He Will Carry You and hear Amy Grant and those guys in the back, I'm going to go check out Dave Boyer.
And the cool thing is you've got all different types. You and I were talking pre-show about how some of the music today, and I'm not going to criticize all of it, but some of it does sound like it comes out of the same machine. It's this
Yes.
generic sound. And you were talking about the uniqueness of some of the artists from the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s. Um, and I think, there's someone like Dave Boyer who's got the big band sound. There's someone like Michael Card or Bob Bennett who have a real folksy sound and sing stories or sing scripture songs. And then there's the rockers, you got the John Schlitz and the Petras and groups like that. And then you've got these pop kind of guys like Wayne Watson and all these different genres of music, because there's an audience for each one. And I think it's neat that the Lord has gifted all of us, whether you're a musician or not, with a unique gift to reach the people that he's placed before us.
That's beautifully said, Scott. That's fantastic. Wow. You kind of got me with that, so I'm just gonna. Earlier today, I had mentioned Larry Norman, and I
Mhm.
believe he is probably one of the greatest performers that nobody's really ever heard of.
Indeed. Yeah, he is.
And did you have any dealings with him, or I just know he was from about the same era, so I didn't know if you had any
Actually,
dealings with him.
years ago when I was first starting, I was actually camping out at Steve Camp's house. He lived up in Wheaton, Illinois, and I'd left college. I knew I wanted to do Christian music, and after I stayed at Steve's for a while, I moved up to Minnesota to work with a youth ministry up there called Young Life. And I saw a poster somewhere that said Larry Norman was coming to Minneapolis. So I called Steve and I said, "Hey, Larry Norman is coming." Well, he loved Norman. And so he said, "Scott, I'm going to fly up and I want to go to the concert with you." So Steve flew up and we went to the Larry Norman concert, and we both had a little demo tape. It was probably a reel to reel, because in those times, this was before cassettes. This is how far back it goes. And I remember that we got into the auditorium. It was at a college, a Christian college, and it was packed. And Norman did his concert, and Steve and I were just amazed, just the powerful storytelling and the way he was able to work through his set and just bring glory to God in such a creative way. And after he finished, Steve and I jumped up and we ran backstage through the curtain. I almost tripped and fell on his guitar, but I had this tape, and Steve had something, and we handed it to Larry, and he kind of looked like, "What's this?" And we just said, "We just want you to listen to our stuff. We don't know where to go." And Christian music, there were no labels then, nothing. And Norman was about one of the only artists out there that had a record deal. And at that time, I think he was with Capitol. So it was a secular label, but it was going into bookstores, and Christians would discover it and they'd go in and buy their albums. Well, we ended up hanging out with Larry that whole evening. I ended up driving him home to his wife at the time, Pam Norman, to her house, because she was from Minnesota. And we kept talking to him, and he said, "You know what, guys, I think the best thing for you two to do is, why don't you fly out to California, and I'll put you up with my band. We have a house for my band. You can stay there, and let's stay for a month, and I'll work with you." And that's when both Steve and I signed with Larry. He became my first manager. And so we worked on a lot of songs. I remember I would do concerts and I would mail Larry a tape, a reel to reel tape of my concert. He would listen to it, and then he would call me up and he'd say, "Okay, here's what you don't want to do, and here's what you do want to do." And we went through that, and he mentored me, and he was doing the same with Steve. So he became my first manager, and always loved the guy. The record label that he was trying to build never did pan out. And I ended up moving on and eventually ended up at Sparrow. But he is definitely a big part of my past, and I think really influenced me in one of the greatest ways in terms of how to communicate. And that's really what it's all about. How do you communicate? How do you write a song that really grabs the listener and brings them before the Lord and minister into their hearts?
Yeah, I've gone down so many Larry Norman rabbit holes over the years, and and that's why when I was getting ready for this, I couldn't remember if there was a connection or if I just had hoped there was a connection.
Yeah.
And so anytime I get to put Larry Norman's name out there and tell people, go check this guy's music out, I mean, it will completely blow your mind, because the way he plays it, the way he says it, the phrasing, and the
Yeah.
pure music of it.
Yeah.
Like you said, it reaches you in a different way than anything that's going on really today.
Yeah. Phenomenal musician.
Great guy. Oh, I do want to ask you, back in 1989, you went over to what was then the USSR. Can you, I don't want to take anything away from that story. Can you tell us what that was like?
It's really interesting. I actually was talking about that to my wife today, that I grew up in the Northern Virginia area outside of Washington, D.C., and I had relatives in Philadelphia, I had relatives over in England. And one time, my uncle and his wife and daughter came over to visit the family on the East Coast, and he was a referee for a soccer team in England that was owned by Elton John and Cliff Richard, who was a huge pop singer in England. He didn't get as big over here, but he had a couple of hits. And my dad was sharing my albums with my uncle. My uncle said, well, give me a couple, and I'm going to give one to Elton John and one to Cliff Richard. And I laughed. I remember sitting at the kitchen table thinking, oh, that's going to happen. Well, a couple of years later, I had a friend who was going over to Eastern Europe and ministering over there. And he told me about this little town. And it's not so little anymore, but at the time it was Tallinn, Estonia, which was a part of the USSR, the Soviet Union. And he wanted me to go with him to this country called Estonia and minister in this city called Tallinn. And so my wife and I went over, and we took our little, 2-month-old baby with us, Jessica, my older daughter. And when I went to this church, and it was one of those things where you couldn't advertise a Christian concert or any kind of a big event at a church. But what they would do is they would tell people that one group of people it started at 4:30, the next group it started at 5, the next people started at 5:36. So people were coming at different intervals. So it didn't cause a big commotion like, hundreds of people standing on this, the stairs of this church. And eventually the concert would start, like at 7. And I did a concert that night in that church. And first time I'd ever sung in the Soviet Union. And the second time I'd ever sung. The first time was Moscow, but the second time was in this church in Estonia. And after it was over, the pastor came over to me and he said, I love these songs of yours. And he said, I only wished you had sung, and he named some song of mine. And I said, how do you know about that song? He goes, well, I have your album. I said, you have my album? And he said, yeah. And he held it up to me. He said, I want you to sign it. And I looked at this album of mine and I said, how in the world did you get my album in the Soviet Union? And he says, well, one time about a year or two ago, Cliff Richard came and sang, did a big concert at one of our big theaters and, the big halls. And he brought some Christian albums, and he says, yours was among them. And when we went backstage to meet him, he gave me these albums. And yours was among them. And I thought, wow, isn't that amazing how years before I ended up in the Soviet Union, God had taken this album out of the hands of my uncle and into the hands of Cliff Richard to bring it to the Soviet Union. And he was able to get it in. I mean, there was, because they were real tight on their borders. They couldn't bring anything in. But yet he got these Christian albums, about 3 or 4 artists. He got them in, and he gave it to this pastor in this Estonian church. I just saw God's providence again, how God weaves things together and connects things, and when you're not expecting it. At the time that we gave those albums to my uncle in our dining room at the house, I never thought I'd go to the Soviet Union. I had no idea that God would ever do this. And that opened up a whole ministry for about 12 years that we went back to Estonia and ended up going into Russia and to other Soviet countries and the East Bloc nations. And God enabled us to have a ministry there, not only to the church, but to a lot of Christian musicians that were hearing this music from the United States, hearing Larry Norman and hearing Love Song and Nancy Honeytree and Randy Stonehill and Phil Keggy. And all of a sudden we want to do this. We want to do this and reach the youth in our countries. And it was very difficult for them. We helped build a recording studio in a couple of different places. We brought a lot of equipment over, and that was a whole different story there. How you sneak in all of this, recording stuff and guitars and drums and things like that into these countries. But they began to build their own recording scene, their own Christian music scene, so that they could reach people in their own country because they could sing the language and they understood the culture. But it was kind of neat to be a part of that. And I always look back at that and praise God for his providence and just how all that started with giving my uncle a record at the kitchen table.
See, those are the stories that I love and that I want to hear more of. Because, like you said, it was just, yeah, sure, here you go, Uncle. Yeah, take this, whatever. Yeah, Elton John, Cliff Richard, sure. And then to what happened. And
Yeah,
it was all a plan. There's no
it
luck
was.
there. It's just from your uncle, from your music to your uncle to Cliff Richard to that pastor. It was all a plan.
It
And
was.
stories like that, I think, especially in today's environment and time, need to be heard
Hmm.
because God is working all the time, whether you see it or not. He is doing his thing,
He is.
and we just have to be paying attention to it.
Absolutely. That's the key.
Oh,
Hmm.
that's great. I wanted to tell you how you and I met. We have a mutual friend, a man named Lloyd Parker.
Oh, I know Lloyd. Yes.
Yep. Yeah, I worked for Lloyd at 2 radio stations, and you were,
WLAX.
yeah, the
Long Island.
LIX and Long Island, and you were one of the first artists at the WLIX Family Series that he brought in, and then you and I met when you did the WLIX Fest back in 1994.
Was it that one outside with Kathy
Yep.
Tricoli? And
With
yep,
Kathy Tricoli, yeah, and
I
we had the
remember that.
volleyball, and we had the comedian Bob Nelson was there,
Yeah.
and yeah, so that's why I was also very excited to get this opportunity to see you again, and that was such an amazing event,
It
and
was.
it's again full circle. Everything is just a full circle.
Mm.
That I got to meet you and listen to you and hear your music back then, and you are actually the first person on CCM Discovery bringing it all in a huge full circle, and I really appreciate that, Scott.
Well, it's been an honor.
So before we wrap things up here, my youngest son Matthew is profoundly autistic, and we do a lot of things with timers with him. So every time we want to go shopping or something, like, Matthew, we got to set a timer, and I'll set it for 10 minutes, and he'll say, and 9 seconds. And it got me to thinking that 9 seconds means a lot, and you can get a lot done in 9 seconds. So I want to ask you in roughly 9 seconds, Matthew's 9 seconds, to just leave us with something. Profound words, what you would do if you were in charge of everything, but just I'm not going to time it, but I just call it Matthew's 9 seconds. And just that anything that you want to leave us with before we go.
Well, I used to close all my concerts with a song called I Wish You Jesus, because at the end of the day, that's the most important thing. I could wish you all these different things in life, all these blessings, but the greatest one is Jesus himself. So I wish you Jesus. I'll leave you with that.
Oh, thank you so much, Scott. I really appreciate that. It has been a great pleasure. Thank you for taking the time, and thank you for heeding the call.
You bet.
That's all I can say.
Amen. God bless you.
You too, Scott. Thank you. Well, thank you, everybody. I want to, first of all, thank Scott Wesley Brown for joining us. And I want to thank you for listening and watching. And we're going to be back again, and we're going to bring you lots of great contemporary Christian music artists, comedians, authors, anybody who is making a difference through God's love is going to hopefully be a part of CCM Discovery. I thank you for being a part of it, and we'll see you again very soon.
Hi, this is Scott Wesley Brown, and welcome to Just Me and My Guitar, sitting here in the studio, just playing some old songs and reminding myself of the great truths of the Word of God. And that's what this song is to me. It's a reminder of God's faithfulness. I remember when I had a heart attack, this was the song that kind of ran through my head the whole time I was in the hospital. And I hope it's a real encouragement to you, no matter what kind of a storm or trial that you're facing, no matter what kind of a mountain you're standing before. We have a promise in God's Word, and that is if He can carry the weight of the world upon His shoulder, then He will carry you. That's great truth, isn't it? There is no problem too big, God cannot solve it. There is no mountain too tall, He cannot move it. And there is no storm too dark, God cannot calm it. There is no sorrow too deep, He cannot soothe it. If He carried the weight of the world upon His shoulder, I know, my brother, that He will carry you. If He carried the weight of the world upon His shoulder, I know, my sister, that He will carry you. He said, come unto me, all who are weary, and I will give you rest. There is no problem too big, God cannot solve it. There is no mountain too tall, He cannot move it. And there is no storm too dark, God cannot calm it. There is no sorrow too deep, He cannot soothe it. If He carried the weight of the world upon His shoulder, I knew, my brother, that He will carry you. If He carried the weight of the world upon His shoulder, I knew, my sister, that He will carry you. If He carried the weight of the world upon His shoulder, I knew, my brother, that He will carry you. If He carried the weight of the world upon His shoulder, I knew, my sister, that He will carry you. He will carry you. He will carry you. Just like those footprints in the sand. You remember that poem? Where the guy said, Lord, where were you? There were two sets of footprints and now there's only one. And Jesus speaks to him and He says, no, that was when I carried you. Hey, thanks for listening. God bless. Have a great day.